Do you people remember, just like I do, the time where Billy Wurster, YouTube's Zazabar, starred in a Bigfoot movie directed by Ishiro Honda? Me neither. Hello YouTube, I'm Adam Noyes of AM Productions, and welcome to this review thingamajigger analysis of a very rare movie, and a movie I was very proud to finally get my little greedy paws on. For those of you, I'm going to be talking about Half Human, the 1955 film directed by the phenomenal director Ishiro Honda, who gave us the original Godzilla just a year previous. And why is this film so rare? Though I'm going to get into that more a little bit later down in the line of this review. The film was banned. It wasn't banned, it was just pulled from circulation. It has yet to be released on DVD and has been released on VHS, but it was the crappy American version that I have not seen. I've only seen this Japanese version, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And the reason why it was banned was for the portrayal of the natives. They were all inbred and everything like that. They look kind of disgusting in the movie too, but we'll talk about that later. But Toho was basically afraid that it would offend them, and they pulled it from circulation. This is a very interesting film. Now, I know I say that a lot, but this movie, it was really interesting because for me it was very hit and miss. There were things that I really liked about it, and yet there were things that I really didn't. Though I can say that I did heavily enjoy this movie. In fact, I'll say it a little bit. My previous Toho film that hasn't been released here in the States was Submersion of Japan. And I enjoyed watching that film. I really had a good time watching this film, and I just want to make that clear right now. And I do recommend it. I'll say that right now. And one of the reasons why I think I enjoyed it so much was because director Ishiro Honda clearly was having the time of his life making this movie. and I sincerely mean that. Ishiro Honda was quite a mountain climber. In fact, that's one of his trademarks in all the films that he works on, is that there is some sort of mountain climbing scene. I mean, look at the original Godzilla. There's a scene where they're running away on Oto Island. They're running up a cliff. That's when we first see Godzilla. On Rodan, they're climbing up those cliffs to get the worms. On Battle in Outer Space, they were climbing up the cliffs on the moon to get to the mothership. In Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster specifically, they are climbing a mountain to get to the meteorite. So it's one of his trademarks that there's always a part of the film where all the main characters, or quite a few of the main characters, are climbing a mountain. And this film is full of that. Right, I mean, it takes place in the mountains. Of course it's going to be like that. And a lot of it was shot outdoors. Very beautifully shot, by the way. And another reason why I think he enjoyed directing this movie was because he was actually able to direct the monster. That's because this wasn't like a gigantic kaiju. Though Eiji Tsuburaya provided the suit and everything on this film. What Ishiro Honda was able to do was actually direct the monster because it was able to actually interact with all the actors. And I think that's part of the reason why he enjoyed it so well. And it really does show. It really does show. That kind of enthusiasm behind the project comes out in full force in this film. Especially when it comes to the snowman himself. But we'll get to that a little later. Now, the first thing I like to talk about in these kind of things is the special effects. And I'll be honest, they're very hit and miss. Unlike the original Godzilla, where a lot of it was prototypey and everything like that, but still looked great, the visual effects here were very hit and miss. Very hit and miss. This was clear. This was Tsuburaya's, I believe, Tsuburaya's first real work with an ape-like creature, which he never perfected. I mean, look at King Kong and look at King Kong and King Kong Escapes. They aren't exactly that great. In fact, I'd go on to say that they're fucking terrible. However, this was his first work, and it really does show. We'll talk about the suit a little bit later, I believe. But I do want to commend him on something, and that was Agent Tsuburaya. Not Agent Tsuburaya so much, but his crew, like Akira Watanabe and everything like that, and those kind of people. They were very good at double projecting. And it came through in the original Godzilla, comes through definitely on Rodan, and this is no exception. There was a lot of matte work in this film, because a lot of the film takes place, as I said, outside or on a set. Well, no, duh, that's what every film is. But I mean like an outdoor set, what I mean. Like it was filmed on a soundstage to make it look like it was outdoors. And a lot of it they had to rely on matte paintings, or traveling mattes, which in Japan at the time was extremely hard to do. This film is full of them. And my favorite example of that is the cave where the snowman lives is beautiful. There's this one wide shot towards the end of the film, and I want you to picture it, where the snowman is like right in the foreground. It's a very wide shot, and the Abominable Snowman's in the foreground while the main characters are way in the background. The entire top surface of the cave and the sides is a matte painting. And it actually took me a while. It's like, wow, what a beautiful set. Oh, wait, there's hardly any set here at all. Because what gave it away, unfortunately, is towards the end of the shot, it started bouncing a little bit. And unfortunately, that gave away the matte painting just a tad bit. But before that, it was really, really beautifully well integrated. And it looked so good. It blew my mind that they were able to make the two melt together as well as they did. A lot of matte paintings, and this goes for American films as well, when a matte painting started, you knew when the matte painting started. And that went whenever they used them. Here, it was very hard, and I think the reason why it was so hard to look at them and to pinpoint them is because I do believe this film was in black and... I do believe it was because this film is shot in black and white. Which to me just kind of fixed some of the problems with the visual effects itself. However, I want to talk about the snowman, mainly. We'll get into his character later. Right now, we're just talking about the suit. I've seen worse. I mean, I lived through Snow Creature and Snow Beast. Those were terrible. This is not overly convincing. But I've seen a lot worse. And, I mean, clearly it looks like a man in a suit. And what they did with it was actually, the fur was goat fur. That's how they made it, which I think they wound up redoing with King Kong and King Kong vs. Godzilla in 1962. But here, there are some scenes where you can kind of see where the suit comes together in the back. That's kind of unavoidable with the suit. And I actually applaud Agent Tsuburaya from learning from that in King Kong vs. Godzilla, where they sewed it instead of zipping it, so therefore it didn't have the seam, even though the suit caught on fire at one point and they couldn't really get the actor out. He suffered severe burns. But where this suit comes out, I believe, comes out with the face. Again, it's a little stiff, specifically around this area. It's a little stiff. But what's interesting about it was that it was half mask, half makeup. And I need to take my hat off for this. Everything from here down was a mask, right? But everything from here up was part of the face. And that meant, like, the eyebrows could be moved, and there's a few scenes where you can actually see that, and I like that. But the number one reason why I think it was a good choice to just be able to do that is, one, primates or mammals have a lot of facial expressions. Lizards don't. And that's why a lot of kaiju films stuck with lizards, was because they were easier to put and more believable to put into a suit, while apes weren't. And what that did from here up, and what that did was it made him have a lot of facial expressions. And on top of that, you could see the actor's eyes. It wasn't Haru Nakajima, forgive me, I forgot the guy's name. but Hiroru Nakajima did not play the ape. I believe it's because he wasn't big enough. He was just simply both too scrawny and too short. But anyways, and a lot of emotions can come through. I mean, look at, this film reminds me a lot of War of the Gargantuas, and I'll get to more why a little later. I'm saying that a lot in this review analysis. But he comes forward, and you know exactly what he's thinking by his eyes. And I like that, because it adds another level of believability and humanity to this monster, which is something that Ishiro Honda was very good at, but we'll get into that a lot later when we talk about the character. There's also some interesting shots in here where the snowman like lifts up a truck and then throws it down the cliff, and then he picks up a human and throws him down the cliff. Okay, these are interesting shots because clearly those are miniatures double projected with the live actor, because instead of it being the other way around where a live actor is integrated with miniature, the miniature was integrated with the live action because clearly he couldn't lift up a truck. I mean, clearly. So what Agent Tsuburaya did was frame for frame basically animate the truck being lifted and thrown off the cliff. And then the same with the human. Now what's interesting with the human was not a dummy when he's getting lifted. It was actually the actor squirming around. And what they did, I believe, was film the human kind of like how I am right now with a stationary camera, and they moved him frame by frame with the creature's hands, and they threw him down, and then they did that. They made it travel down. I mean, in some ways you can do that now with like programs like Sony Vegas. It's actually very easy to do, but back then it was very difficult. Yeah, it's kind of distracting, but it's better than having the actors be moved by wires and have them very clunky. Because here, like, there's a lot of force with it, and though it's not perfect, it's okay. It's alright, I guess. And the suit itself wasn't exactly that light. I mean, it was definitely way lighter than the original Godzilla suit and the one from Raids Again. But it was very bulky and very hot. Again, with all those studio lights blaring down at him. And there's some stop motion in this film, too. Now, normally when I hear about stop motion, I'm like, yay! But here I'm like, it was so bad. Because there's a shot where the snowman is climbing up on a cliff, and it's stop motion, and it literally looked like a scene straight out of Nosferatu. It goes by wicked quick, like, he travels a long distance, in other words, really quickly. And it looks just junky and bad. It was really bad. Let's move on to the main characters, mainly Akira Takarada and Momoko Kochi, who, of course, they would be the main characters. There's a lot of recycled actors that go in every Ishiro Honda movies, mainly because the actors loved Ishiro Honda, because he was a very swell guy to work with. The main characters in this film, the main party, the main group that the film, I can't even say focuses on, they're not that great. Actually, they're terrible, to be completely honest. And that's because they're all one-dimensional. All these main groups, they're completely one-dimensional. They have very little to do with the plot, period, other than make us go to the mountains. Most of the film focuses on these cartoon villains that are so over the top you can't help but laugh. Which is fine with me. This village that takes place in the mountains, and the creature himself, which thank God they focus on the creature. Actually, the creature truly is the main character in this film, which I like. But, you see, the film is structured very strangely. At the beginning, the first section of the film, the first act of the film is mainly flashback. And then there's the second act of the film, which is them going to the jungle, or not jungle, the mountain woods, this forbidden woods, where apparently no one has ever come out from, which is clever, because you think that it's setting that the snowman was killing all these people, which later you actually find out are the natives, not the snow creature at all, which I find is very cool. And then there's the final act of the film, which is when they chase the snowman into the cave. But unfortunately, literally in the second act of the film, and ways into the third act, I believe, the main characters that were supposedly set up disappear for literally, I counted the screen time, about 45 minutes. They just disappear, and we focus on the village, we focus on the villains, and we focus mainly on the snowman. They just utterly disappear. That's a problem, because you've established all these characters, right? You've established these characters, and you're trying to make us like them and stuff like that, but before that, they weren't really doing anything. Yeah, we kind of felt bad for them because their brothers were killed, but in the opening part of the film, which bugs me, I gotta say, because the Abominable Snowman, I'm gonna say that now as a little segue, the Abominable Snowman in this film is portrayed as a very kind creature, as a very loving creature, as a very compassionate creature. In the beginning of the film, they receive a phone call because what happened was the group split up. And while one was going to go to this other cavern to just kind of spend the night and just check out the area, the other group, the one with Momoko Kochi and Akira Takarada, goes to a camp a little closer. What happens is a snowstorm comes through, and they receive a phone call from the other cavern, and you hear them screaming and a gunshot, and then more screaming, and you hear, first off, great sound effects, but you hear like a creature screaming in the background, which is very eerie, very ominous, which that's another thing I like about this film, is that it's very, at points, very eerie and very ominous, and beautifully shot and beautifully lit. Especially on the sets. But if that was the creature, why the hell is it attacking the cavern? Because later in the film, it's clearly like the creature's kind, the creature's good. So why the fuck have it do this? Why the fuck have it where it's clearly coming into the camp and attacking them? Or setting that up? It doesn't make sense in terms of the Abominable Snowman creature's character, because later it establishes that it's the only one left. Later on in the film, it establishes that it's the only snowman left. And so it's attacking them, but then in the second half of the film, it's helping them? That makes no sense, character-wise. That's a complete 180-degree turn, and does not fit with what the character is. In fact, there's a point in the film, we'll get into that, we'll get into more detail a little later, I swear. The snowman actually helps one of those people go back into its cave. And though he can't save him because the guy is too far gone, it was making him comfortable. There's even a point where the guy has a note that says, he's making me very comfortable. I know I'm gonna die here, but at least he's trying to help. And I'm like, then why would he attack the base in the first place? Why would he attack the cavern? That makes no utter goddamn fucking sense. What would make more sense is if suddenly, maybe because they established that there was an avalanche that happened later that night, just establish that they were trapped in the fucking avalanche. Why the fuck would you have a part where they're on the phone and you hear a goddamn gunshot, you hear them screaming? It makes no goddamn fucking sense. I know I'm getting really worked up about that. And I really apologize for that. But it irks me because everything with the Abominable Snowman after that just doesn't fit. And with an Ishiro Honda film, usually what he does is he loves making things fit. He loves making pieces work together. Fuck, look at the original Godzilla. He made things fit together perfectly in that film, or almost perfectly. And the only other film that I can really compare this to is War of the Gargantuas. That fit together perfectly. That was like the perfect puzzle. And everything fit together. Here, that is a giant chunk of the film that just doesn't make a lick of sense. And it's clearly the Abominable Snowman, because they find hairs in the cavern that they say don't match any known animal to live in that area. Then they disappear for 45 minutes, and then the main characters just disappear for the first 45 minutes of the film. The main characters do. And it'd be one thing if they progressed the plot, but they don't. The only time that they really progress the plot, and I mean this truly, is at the end of the film where they corner the snowman in the cave. And that so much isn't even the main characters. That's actually more of this village girl that we'll talk about a little later. Her getting her redemption, or what she feels is her redemption. And she's actually a good character. She's the one human character in this film that I genuinely liked, and I felt that she was actually pretty well done. But they're just there to they don't move the plot along. So I'm like, you could have almost cut them out completely, and the film wouldn't have been too much different, because ultimately the actions that the snow beasts take are because of the villains and because of the natives. That's it. Not because of these main characters that are camping out in the woods. And that's a problem, as you can probably imagine. Now, let's talk about the villains for a little bit. Now, the villains are circus people, and they're all extremely over-the-top bad guys. They're actually very fun to watch. They're very, as I said, over the top. Not quite as over the top as Doctor Who from King Kong Escapes, don't get me wrong, nothing will ever top that phenomenal performance. But they're all pretty over the top. And they have nothing to do with the main characters. And that's a big problem. What I would have done is wish that these two teams work together at the beginning, because during the second act of the film is when they're going back to the woods to try to find their missing friend, their missing brother. because they found the body of one of the other ones from the opening of the film. And when they're going back, it would have been better if the two teams worked together, because then I believe we would have gotten more time devoted to them. We would have had more character development, I believe. Though probably little, we would have had probably a little more, and it would have made more sense why they're there. They go off in these two different directions, and they stay diverged. They don't ever come together, really. And it just doesn't quite fit. It just doesn't go with the main characters. In fact, these villains do more to progress the plot than what are supposedly the main characters are supposed to do. These villains, I almost wish the film focused on them. And the film does, in very many ways, focuses more on them and the villagers than they do on the main characters. And so it makes me ask, where are the priorities of the script? And ultimately, it comes down to the snowman. Seriously, it really does come down to the snowman. And stuff like that. But these humans, it's the villains that ultimately push the story along more than those other guys, than the main characters. And that's because, of course, they're the circus people, so of course they heard the story that the main characters put in the newspaper, saying, hey, guess what? We think it was a snowman. So of course they're going to go out there and be like, we want to capture the snowman. Man. And so they're going to try to do that, and they ultimately almost succeed, but the snowman breaks out because of a little secret that I'm going to talk about a little later. He's secretly a robot guard. Spoiler alert, the snowman is secretly a robot guarding a alien base underneath Yellowstone Park. Yes, that was a $6 Million Man reference. Let's talk about the natives. The natives are the reason why this film was banned, and I already mentioned that earlier, but I'll just say it again here. The natives are the reason why this film was banned. And I can understand why, because they are all inbred to fuck. They're more inbred than the aristocrats from Europe. It's that bad. They're all seriously deformed, and it's very much shown. Like, some of them have bump legs, some of them have hunchbacks, some of them don't have an eye. It's gross. Props for the makeup department for making those look as good as they did, and I believe that the black and white film had a lot to do with that as well. But they're all deformed, including the kind of elder of the group, who's clearly insane in the head. And all these natives are clearly insane. Like, they're shaking a lot, and they're very, well, there's no other way to put it. They're very savage. And it's for that reason that Toho pulled the film, was because they're afraid that a lot of the natives of Japan would take offense to that and boycott the film, and they'd lose a lot, and Toho would lose a lot of money instead of the opposite. They'd gain a lot of money because a lot of people would then want to go and see the movie. But then again, Japan is a lot more liberal than the United States. That's why. That's literally the only reason why. There isn't really anything. But then again, there's this one character, the female character, the female native, who ultimately becomes my favorite human character in the film. She's not deformed whatsoever. In fact, she looks quite beautiful. And what she is, she wants to escape the camp, and she wants to explore the world. And in the beginning of the film, you actually see her kind of exploring the area, and she actually comes to the cabin where Momoko Kochi and Akira Takarada are, and she doesn't talk to them at all because she's scared of them. But she's curious at the same time. Her performance is genuinely great. I can't believe she was actually billed first. It wasn't Akira Takarada, it was her. So clearly she was a bigger actor at the time, or actress at the time, than Akira Takarada. And she did a phenomenal job, because she balances, especially during the first 2 acts of the film, she balances on a tightrope between curious and afraid, because she knows what her native, what basically her family will do. Now, this also leads to me as a complaint. I'd make her just a little bit deformed because everybody else was deformed. That, in fact, would actually make some of her decisions work better later, because what she does is later, or in the film, she helps Akira Takarada. Akira Takarada goes out chasing the snowman in the second act of the film. He gets hurt, and she helps him. It could have been a very Beauty and Beast story, except the male is the beauty and she's the beast kind of thing, and I think that would have worked a lot better than dropping it, which is what they do. Because she clearly is attracted to him, well, he's scared shitless. And she helps him and brings him to to the natives, and the natives are like, this is bad because no outsiders. And that's when we discover that this valley that they're in, the reason why all those people never returned that went in is because the natives killed them, not the snowman. That's the point where we learned that it was the humans that did all this shit. What the natives do is they take Akira Takarada and tie him on this ledge and dangle him there. Which, first off, is a nice reference to King Kong, by the way. Like, the shot's identical because the snowman pulls him up and frees him. Because there's a shot in King Kong where Anne and Jack Driscoll are climbing down the rope and eventually have to jump into the river below, and Kong's pulling them up. The shot's identical. Seriously, look at them side by side. A nice little reference there. And of course they'd want to do that because everybody who worked on this film were big fans of King Kong, so of course they'd put it in there. But anyways, back to my point. She helps him, and she's clearly attracted to him, and they could have done something more with that, but they don't. It just is kind of dropped, and that's a problem I have, even though her performance is great. And she clearly wants to go with the main characters and help them out, because there's a scene where she mistakes the villains for those main characters, and she agrees to help the villains find the snowman, because she thinks they're just curious and that they're not going to do anything to the snowman because they tricked her. And she helps them. She clearly wants to go with him because the natives have banned her from the village. They have damned her for all eternity because she has brought these outsiders, even though it's not really her fault, into this land. And so, like, even her father, which we believe is the elder or her grandfather or whatever, has said, on his deathbed, goes, look what you have done to this village, damn you. And you feel so bad for her, because you're like, it's not her fault. She was just thrown into this situation, and her performance is fantastic as a result, because you just see a lot of contemplation with her and stuff, because when the snowman goes berserk and destroys the village and it's all on fire, there are some great fucking shots with some menacing shots of the snowman like raising his arms and roaring this rather unnerving scream that he has, props to sound department. And then you have these tracking shots of her walking through it, all these flames in the foreground and the background and everything like that, beautifully well shot. You just see her silhouette and you see the reflection in her eyes as the flames flicker. Beautifully well done, and she's just standing there like, this is all my fault, even though it's not. She believes that it's all her fault. It's so good. It's so wonderful. And that's what leads to her wanting redemption for her sins. And that's why it leads to her decision to confront the snowman at the end to save Momoko Kochi, because apparently the snowman, we'll get into why later, has had some sort of a crush on Momoko Kochi's character, which at least they explain in this film. It's not like in some of the other films where like the primate monster falls for the girl and they don't explain it at all. It's kind of explained in here, which I give the props to. Sure, they explain that, but they don't explain everything else. I don't care. And at the end, the snowman takes Momoko Kochi's character. People are mowing the lawn outside, and the snowman brings him to the cave and is like he's going to kill her, and jump into this pile of boiling, into this cavern that leads to a volcanic geyser kind of thing. And the native woman goes up there and saves Momoko Kochi by confronting the monster and actually having a slight fight with the monster. She ultimately pays the ultimate price because she manages to distract the monster enough so that everyone can go save Momoko Kochi. But yet she also falls in with the snowman into the pit of doom, the pit of boiling water, and she pays the ultimate price. But she, in her way, by making that decision, has atoned for her sins, has come forward and said, I'm good. I have redeemed myself. Even though we as the viewer know that she has no reason why to fear this. She has no reason why she has to redeem herself. She was doing the right thing the entire time, or we feel that way. She didn't, and she stuck with her morals, and she ultimately paid the ultimate price, which is a very, very Japanese thing. And that is why I believe she is the greatest character in the movie, and I genuinely like her. Now, as I said before, the reason was the film was they're afraid of offending the Japanese natives. The film doesn't really portray the natives as bad guys per se, but it depicts them as driven to madness by their beliefs and of isolation. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. I believe that could be Ishiro Honda politics coming through. Because we all know that Ishiro Honda is the king of allegory, and he does all this and throws all this and stuff. And my favorite example of his allegory being Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, where Godzilla is America, Rodan is Russia, Mothra is Japan, and it turns out that King Ghidorah is China. I love that allegory, and I'll always stick to that allegory. That was a great, great thing. But I believe this is some of Ishiro Honda politics speaking, because he was very much a pacifist and believed in the world coming together to ultimately help each other in a time of crisis. While these people, these natives, are very isolationist, and they're very disgusting and very deformed and everything like that. And he believes that that's what Japan maybe was before World War II and before the war ended and stuff like that. I believe that could be some of Ishiro Honda talking. But another thing that I want to bring up about this film depicting the natives the way they are is the music score is done by Masaru Sato, who also did, just a little while previous to this, the horrible music score to Godzilla Raids Again. The music score for this film is very good, by the way. It's very ominous, and there's like a scene where the snowman creeps up on the main character's camp, and it's this very eerie, very creepy, very low score piece of music that he has there. It's my favorite piece of music from the film. Very, very creepy overall, and very well done. I applaud Masaru Sato for doing the music. But Ishiro Honda worked with Akira Ifukube a lot, and sure, this is at the beginning of Ishiro Honda's true career. But I was surprised that it wasn't Ifukube, but the more I thought about it, the more I had a theory behind it. Akira Ifukube, though not a native himself, grew up around a lot of these. I forgot what they're called, but they were like the original people of Japan. And he grew up with them a lot, and they were very, very mocked in Japanese culture. And that was way through the 70s and into the early 80s, actually. Much like the Native Americans here in the United States. Kind of like that in Japan. And Akira Ifukube felt a lot of sympathy for them, and he grew up listening to their music. That's why all of his music is very ostinato-ish and very brash. It's because their music was very brash, and he grew up with them. In fact, he went on in 1956 or 57, I believe, he scored this movie that was all about these two children that came from that tribe. And he personally took that up as a pet project of his because he believed in their story, and he was very sympathetic towards them. And I have a theory that that's the reason why he turned down doing the score for this film. Because of that portrayal, and he didn't like it. That's my theory. That could be completely wrong, and I could be pulling that completely out of my ass. But if you look at Akira Ifukube and who he was, it would make sense. While Masaru Sato was very much so, I'll score everything at that time, because he was just coming out of Fumio Hayazaki, or I forgot his name. He was his mentor. He was just coming off of the wings of him. Now, let's talk about the good thing with this film. The snowman. I actually have little notes about the snowman because my note literally says rant about why I love the snowman. This film, the main focus on the film is the snowman, and that is where it rightfully should have been. Ishiro Honda did that with War of the Gargantuas and did it perfectly. This is a little clunky, I'll have to admit, but its focus was in the real right spot. Because the snowman is by far the best thing about this film, and is by far the best character in this film. He's fantastically directed. The guy who was in the suit fantastically portrays the snowman and the conflicts going on with the snowman. Is perfectly well done. It is honestly so well done that it almost makes me forgive a lot of the sins that happen with the film. He's just extremely well done. I mean, I can talk about it for days and days here about why I love the snowman in this film, but I do have to say this. You have to go out and watch the film. You have to go out there and see the performance for yourself to truly believe what I'm about to say. If you can get your hands on a copy of this film, I'm sure there is. I got mine off of the internet. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Get it. Look it up. Get it with subtitles. Seriously, the snowman's performance is that good. Watch it. though I'm going to explain a little bit why here. What the snowman is a very lonely monster. And not really a monster, a lonely being, I should say. It is explained early on that... Well, let me just show you. The snowman isn't alone in this movie. He has his son, or he has like this little boy. A little snowman boy. A little snow boy. He has a snow boy with him. Which is so fucking adorable, it's not even funny. But, and they're living together in this cave. A very peaceful life. The natives feed them a little bit, though they go out and get curious. But the snowman, the adult, is very, very lonely. Because the rest of his kind, as explained in this film, died out because of these mushrooms they were eating. They didn't know it was poisonous, which I think is bullshit. Because any animal, I mean, look at deer and look at moose and stuff like that, when they eat... gorillas, when they eat something that's poisonous, they're kind of like, oh, that's poisonous, we should probably stay away from that. But anyways, so he's very lonely and he was looking for a companion. I believe that that the snow boy with him isn't actually his son. I believe that the snow boy with him was him going out one day after like his entire family died, and he found this boy all alone, and he basically took him in under his wing. Because I believe that makes sense for the age gap in this. I believe that makes sense for that, and I think that's a very well done thing. Because the way how they kind of interact with each other isn't so much a father-son relationship, but more of a friends relationship. Because there's a scene where the snowman gets captured by the villains, right? And first off, that scene is wonderful. I have so many. My mind is going like in a million different places right now, so I apologize if this is really kind of all over the place. And the first glance you get that the snowman is actually good and not the evil thing that we think it was going to be, is when we have when he helps out Akira Takarada. He brings Akira Takarada up from being tied on that cliff, and he pulls him up, and he actually cuts him loose with his fingernails. You're not quite sure. At that point, you're still like, oh god, what's he going to do to Akira Takarada? And you're like, oh, like on the edge of your seat. And then all of a sudden, Akira Takarada turns around and locks eyes with the monster, and the monster just stands there, and then the monster like kind of gives this kind of small bow, and then turns around and picks up the dead bear that the snowman had killed, slinks it around his shoulder, and walks away. It was just there helping him. It was just being the kind monster that it was. The kind thing it do. And, you know, that's why I love Ishiro Honda. That's why I believe Ishiro Honda deserves a lot more credit than what he ultimately gets. Is that he has that wonderful quote, the tragedy of monsters, that they're born too big, too mean, stuff like that. Here it's perfect, because the monster is so beautifully presented in that scene. And then he goes back to the cave. And what has happened in between those two scenes is that the villains captured the snow boy, and they're waiting for the snowman, and they watch the snowman return to the cave and everything like that. And the snow... It's such a good fucking scene, because the snowman puts down the bear and starts calling out to the boy. He never comes. And the snowman is like, what? And so he goes further down the cave. He keeps calling, almost whimpering in many ways. And goes out there and looks for his kind of adopted son, and then the villains hurt the snow boy, the little snowman, and he cries out in pain, and that catches the snowman's attention. And this is genius. At first, the snowman hides. The snowman is like, oh, like he's like, oh god, what's going on? And he hides. He's afraid, because I think the snowman knew more than anything this was kind of a trap. But he hears his son crying out in pain. And he looks back, and then he looks forward. Like, this is a phenomenal scene. He looks back, and then he looks forward. And then he lets out a roar. And then he goes forward. What a great human moment that sequence was. Seriously, what a great human sequence that was. Because, of course he's scared. He doesn't know what's going on, so he hides. But he's all alone. And the only other thing that he really has that gives him a sense of completion, that gives him a sense of hope, is his adopted son, that little one that's with him. And he hears that, and he hears his son in pain. So he swallows up his fear and goes out and ultimately gets captured because of it. And now, I love how the villains aren't even interested in the little one. They let the little one go, and they just captured the big one, and they put him in his truck, and they're driving away. What's interesting, the little one even has character, because the little one, knowing that that its father came to save him and got captured, the little one tries to save his father. It's an amazing scene because he jumps down onto this truck, right, and tries desperately to save his father, who is knocked out. He's been knocked out with chloroform. And ultimately, the humans capture him and put him in the cave and see him as an added bonus. But what happens then is that the snowman wakes up, right, and manages to break out of the cage because, you know, he's manly, he's strong, he's a lumberjack. And he breaks out, right, and him and his son break out, but the humans go after him. When they're jumping out of the truck, one of the villains shoots the kid, and the kid dies. Now, the snowman doesn't notice this for a while and is going back in the woods, and he just basically flips out at all the humans. And then he sees his son is dead. There's a flip that switches in the snowman's mind. You can see it in his eyes. I love that. Because he just flipped this truck off of, with a lot of the villains in it, off of this ledge, and they all die, right? And so then all of a sudden he turns around and he's about ready to attack. And then all of a sudden he stops and he looks, and the camera pans over and he sees his son. He starts crying. Though we don't really see any tears, the whimpers that he makes are just really sad. Really makes you feel for the creature. And he's there, and he holds his son for a little bit, thinking that he might still be alive, but he's not. Very tragic scene, actually. A very well directed scene as well. And he's like, no, like this is my son. This is the only one I had left. I'm all alone now. My whole purpose is now gone. And he turns around, and a look of rage on his face when he sees the leader of the villains trying to crawl away, and he picks him up and throws him off the cliff. And the thing that ruins the scene, unfortunately, is that the dummy that gets thrown off the cliff looks so bad. It is so utterly bad. But anyways, back to the character thing. And after he does that, he's still angry and kind of roars like Kong does and King Kong versus Godzilla. And then he lowers his shoulders again and goes back to his son and just picks him up and just carries him back in the wood, and just carries him back to where I think they're going to go. They're going to go to the cave. Beautiful, beautiful stuff with the snowman's character. And I mean that from the bottom of my goddamn heart. And so what happens after that? The snowman goes fucking berserk and destroys the native village, which I already discussed that scene quite a bit. And then the native goes to the main characters and takes Momoko Kochi's character. Now, the film kind of depicts this as a Beauty and Beast kind of thing, where he finds himself attracted to Momoko Kochi, because there's a scene, the first time we see the snowman is when he kind of reaches out and just touches her face. But here's what I believe it should have been, and what actually kind of fits. And I know it's me kind of thinking too much into it, but it kind of fits with the character of the snowman. Momoko Kochi is clearly loved by the group, especially Akira Takarada, and there's this other guy with kind of shaggy hair with a rifle that kind of have taken a liking to Momoko Kochi's character. And the snowman goes and immediately takes her back to his cave and leaves a direct path for the humans to follow. I believe what the snowman did was take someone that the humans loved very much, and if you look at it, he keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper into the cave until he goes to that geyser. I believe full-heartedly that what was going on there in that sequence was that he was waiting for them to come, and that he was going to kill her. He was going to take something that they love dearly away from them. Just like how he believes they, even though they really didn't, it was the villains, he believes they took away something very, very important to him. Very well done. The snowman in this film is extremely, extremely well done, and by far the greatest thing about the film. And before that, you actually feel more sympathy for the monster as well, because they find the remains of that friend that they were looking for. And he writes down on this note, the friend that they find, says, "The snowman took me in and was taking care of me. I know I'm going to die here because my wounds are too bad," or something along that line, but he took care of me. He tried to take care of me. And it shows just how good at heart the snowman is and what humanity has done to him. That has ultimately driven him to go to this insane route where he's going to kill Momoko Kochi. And the snowman ultimately dies at the ending, of course, with that native woman. That being said, this is a very mixed bag film. The humans kind of suck, but the monster makes the film completely worth watching, and I recommend it from the bottom of my heart that you go out and find this film. This film needs to have a legit DVD release. It does. Because the quality of the film that I have, or the version that I have, isn't the best. It isn't... It's clearly a VHS rip, but it has subtitles, and I was able to watch it, and I was able to love it, and I was very glad that I found it. To me, a decent film by Ishiro Honda. The problem is that the snowman can't carry the whole movie. The thing with War of the Gargantuans was that the humans weren't that great, but they progressed the plot. And here the humans rarely progress the plot. It just all kind of unfolds. And it's for that reason that my final rating for this film, I'm giving this film a 2.5 out of 4 stars. I highly recommend watching this film. Go out and look for it. Seriously. Go out and look for it. If anything, it'll be a fun little knick-knack that you have, because this is a very rare film to find. Yeah, so go out and watch it. So, go on Facebook, like AN Productions, like my new film, Which Way They Walk, which will resume shooting in September. Do like the Sons of Serizawa Network homepage on Facebook. I would appreciate it if you became my patron, if you want to see more videos like this come out. Subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. If you've seen this movie, leave a comment. I want to know other people's opinions of it. But this is Adam Noyes of AN Productions saying, sayonara.